Good afternoon, good evening even at this time. Noswaith dda I chi gyd. I'm Bydd Cope, Senior Development Manager from the Development and Alumni Relations team here at Cardiff University. I'm delighted to host this evening's session. Thank you for joining us and welcome you to be part of Cardiff University's community of alumni and friends who are supporting the learning and research activities here at Cardiff University. Many of our supporters donate and fundraise for cancer research here at Cardiff, and over the next half an hour that will be the focus of our session, cancer research and cancer. I'm delighted to have Professor Andrew Godkin join us this evening. Andy is a clinical professor based at the School of Medicine. He's a consultant gastroenterologist and hepatologist at the University Hospital of Wales. And Andy is here tonight to answer any questions you might have about cancer and cancer research. As a change to our advertised plans, we have received apologies from Professor Awan Gallimore, who was due to be with us tonight, but she's been unavoidably detained. But Andy, you're here with us tonight and you're going to be answering the questions that we've received from attendees beforehand, and also we welcome live questions coming through the Q&A section at the bottom of the screen, and we will do our very best to answer them. If we're unable to answer them, then we will get back to you in the next few days with those answers. Without any further ado, welcome Andy. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much for asking me to join you this evening, Bydd.
So Andy, first of all, let's introduce you. You're a gastroenterologist. Tell us what that is really. What's your specialty?
Well, I have a job in the university which is a 50-50 split between clinical work and research. And clinically, gastroenterology or hepatology is looking at diseases of the alimentary canal and the liver. And I focus more on solid organ disease, really, which is the liver. A little bit of luminal gastroenterology, but mainly I focus clinically on liver disease, liver cancer. But where the luminal gastroenterology crosses over with our lab interests is I deal with colon cancer. Mainly in the diagnosis of it through colonoscopy, but the treatment of it obviously falls in the remit of oncologists and surgeons. But we have an active research interest in cancer, and the human cancer we focus on at the moment includes epithelial cancers like colon cancer or breast cancer.
Okay, so tell us a bit more then about your research and how that fits into Cardiff University's strategy on cancer research. Tell us more about your area.
Well, I run a lab with Professor Gallimore, who can't be with us this evening, and we focus on cancer immunology mainly, and the overall drive of our research is to try and work out how to make the immune system attack and destroy cancers. And obviously this has been very much in the press in the last few years because of the success of a class of drug called checkpoint inhibitors, which are drugs which kind of take off the brakes off T cells. And although at the moment it's early days, it's very illustrative. If you get it right, then it's a very powerful and effective anti-cancer therapy. And we research really into, I suppose, three broad areas in tumours. We try and work out what are the bits of the tumour that your white blood cells see and attack. So what's called sort of what we sort of target in the vaccines, the proteins that are the allergens that we can use. So we try and make things, or immunogens, we try and find out which proteins the immune system's saying. We try and work out how to get your white blood cells into the tumours, so access into the tumour, and how to get enough of them in there. And then lastly, we try and work out what it is about the tumour that is so immunosuppressive that turns off those white cells. So you have to sort of get enough of the right type of white cells. You have to get them into the tumour. You have to take away the brakes allow the white cells to do their thing and destroy the tumours. And if you get that right, then I think you've got a good chance of controlling or destroying tumours.
Okay. And is the research still experimental, or is it translational? Are you
We
working?
definitely have an eye for translation. So we've run and completed a trial in colon cancer. It completed it 2 or 3 years ago, and that was taking patients with very advanced metastatic disease and seeing if we could slow it down and increase the time before patients succumb to the tumour. And that was using a vaccine called Trovax. So it's a pox virus which contains an antigen, which we're very interested in, called 5T4. It's a protein that's actually expressed in the placenta, but is upregulated in tumours. And it's found in lung tumours, in breast and stomach and colon cancer. So it's a very attractive target. And we gave that to patients with an immunomodulatory agent to try and remove the regulation and give the vaccine. And now we have a program of work which is all about making proteins more immunogenic, so they can be seen better. And we're about to embark, with the support of Cancer Research Wales, into a 500 patient study, which is called BIC, which is Brief Intervention with Cyclophosphamide in Colon Cancer. And this is a drug which we use in a very small dose. It removes the regulation and enables your own natural immune system to attack little nests of cells which might grow into metastases. And it's going to be a 10-centre study led from Cardiff, with 10 centres in the UK. So we're quite excited about that. And that's really directly from the work we've done both in model systems and in the bench, really, to try and develop this as an agent.
And how long do you think that study will durate for?
How long will it run for?
Yeah, how long will it run?
It's funded for 5 years. So we will recruit 500 patients over a period of time, hopefully over the first of 2.5, 3 years. And then there'll be, for each patient, there's a 36-month follow-up. And essentially, we take patients who've had their colon cancer or colorectal cancer treated, and so they are cured, but we know that, maybe 20-25% of them over 3 years will relapse. And so they're a very high risk group of patients, and we're randomizing them into receiving a brief intervention with low dose cyclophosphamide, what we call metronomic cyclophosphamide, or watching weight. And then we measure their immune responses. And we already know that cyclophosphamide will increase immune response to the tumours, and we monitor them clinically. And it's no additional cost to the NHS, because the patients would be monitored anyway over 36 months. So we're not requiring them to have lots of extra scans, lots of extra visits, really, very few. Some of them we will study in a little bit more detail, because we take their bloods to measure immune responses, but at the end of the day, it will be a clinical outcome. And yeah, launching this year, waiting for the final paperwork from CL Wales, and then it will hopefully launch in the autumn and run for 5 years.
Good luck with that.
Thank you.
We've had a few questions in. I'm going to take a step back with this question and ask you, this particular question says, is cancer a modern disease? Why does it seem to be getting more prevalent?
It's not a modern disease. There's evidence of tumours, bone tumours you can find in sort of mummified skeletons and even older remains. So I think tumours have been with us for a long time. But the fact is, it is also outside tumours where we're born with the susceptibility genes. It is a disease of aging. And if you bear in mind, in 1800, the average life expectancy was in the early 30s, and now in 2022, the average life expectancy is in the 80s. Just by statistically, if you live longer, you've got a greater chance of developing cancers. What ravaged humans and populations in the past were, the big infectious plagues, TB, smallpox. Childhood mortality was very high. And these have really, through public health measures and vaccines, etc., have being pushed to the side. I mean, I know we're in the middle of a pandemic at the moment, SARS-CoV-2, but on the whole, we all, or most of us, will live to be a lot longer. And so it's just, a fact that you've got a greater chance of getting cancer. And I also have to say, my colleagues, for instance, the cardiologists have done, an amazing job at treating heart failure and ischemic heart disease really aggressively. I remember as a houseman years ago, the ward was full of people in heart failure and with angina and ischemic episodes, and that's really gone from a lot of medicine because they're so quick to intervene. And so that cohort of patients we see less of, and so people come through, and if you get older, eventually, that's why dementia is so in the fore at the moment, because we're developing to be a much more elderly population, and cancer and dementia are going to become major issues in our society in the next, well, they are already, in the ensuing sort of 20, 30 years.
Okay, thank you. Here's a nice follow-on question that's just arrived in the last couple of minutes. What's our best bet to beat cancer, Andy? Is it prevention or cure?
Well, I think it has to be a little bit of both. I think prevention is really important. You look at populations with lower instances of tumours. I mean, there's always an element of just, it's rotten luck. You've acquired a mutation to a gene which has facilitated cancer to develop, and sometimes that's just a random process through longevity. But there are many things which are preventable. I think lifestyle has a huge impact on this. Obesity is related to developing cancer. Lack of exercise, the wrong diet, processed foods lacking in fiber, too much alcohol, obviously smoking. There's lots of lifestyle measures you can do which can reduce the incidence. So I think prevention is really, really important. And also, if you think about those interventions that you have, try and be more healthy. So if you try and avoid being overweight, try and avoid drinking too much, smoking, have a healthy diet, you just generally you'll be fitter, you'll feel better. It's the only intervention that's been shown to be effective for dementia. Is the main risk factor is lifestyle. So people have healthy diets, healthy lifestyles, have less dementia. So I think that's a win-win. But beating it, there will be, as we live longer, there will be situations where we are going to have to get better treatments. And I'm a bit biased because I've spent so much of my time researching into immunology and cancer immunology, but I do think if we get it right, I think the treatments will become much better, much more effective. I think we'll develop a range of interventions which drive the immune system to attack cancers, and I feel it would be a while, but I feel cautiously optimistically when we understand what's holding the immune system back, we will get much better treatments for cancer. There's some notable, really awful, standout cancers at the moment, which we do badly with. Brain cancers, pancreatic cancer. There's really sort of poor prognosis, but there's been fantastic advances. I listen to my colleagues who treat esophageal cancer with more effective early interventions of chemoradiotherapy, colon cancer, screening, picking up early, curing it by a good operation. Breast cancer, the range of hormonal treatments and interventions with, what are called kinase inhibitors now is much better than it was. So I think the treatments, are great in as much as they're much better than they were. They still have associated toxicities, but also if you look historically, the hematological malignancies, what my colleagues in hematology have done against leukemias and lymphomas is just fantastic. If you get a leukemia now, you can expect to be cured. If you got a leukemia in the 50s, you would expect to die of it. So, there are some really huge strides that are being made in treating cancers, but definitely a long way to go.
Yeah. And so, what would be, here's a good question that's just arrived. What one must-know thing about researching cancer would you go back in time to share with your 21-year-old self? Oh, that's a good one.
Say that again.
What one must-know thing about researching cancer would you like to share with your 21-year-old self?
Okay, yep. So I wish I'd had more strength in my convictions. When I was younger, I think I was a registrar still, and I went to a meeting on inflammatory bowel disease in Dublin. And I sat down. One of those meetings, had talks in the morning. You could do things in the afternoon. And when I was a houseman, I'd worked for a surgeon. He was a registrar. Then he ended up being a colorectal surgeon in Oxford. And he was at the meeting. It's called Bruce George. I said, "Oh gosh, hello, Bruce." He was actually quite strict when I was a houseman, but everyone else wanted to go shopping. And Bruce said, "Oh, I wouldn't mind, going to watch a game of rugby or something." We're in Dublin, and so we sat down. And I remember, this is the early '90s, I guess. And I said, the treatment of cancer is so crude. Chemotherapy and toxicity, and it's awful. I said, I can't think of a paradigm shift. And if you get the immune system to work better, Bruce, surely that would be the way. And he still said, well, it's a fact. I've known it for years. When a patient jumps out of bed after an operation, they're the ones that do well. And when they get sort of post-operative complications and pneumonias and they don't get going, they're the ones who do badly. And so we're talking around and said, yeah, that's because, your immune system hasn't been facilitated. And we talked the whole afternoon about this. And I wish now I'd pursued that more aggressively 10 years before I started doing it. Around about 2000, I really got into cancer immunology. I wish I'd really had the courage of my convictions back then and just gone for it straight away. Maybe gone to one of the big labs in America to learn my skills a bit quicker, if I have any skills.
Okay, I'm sure you do. Here's a question that's just arrived. Do you think immunotherapy is looking to become the best treatment option? Are there any other exciting areas being researched in regards to therapeutics? And this person says, I've read a little into targeting synthetic lethality, specifically in BRCA mutant cancers.
Sorry, synthetic what? Sorry, synthetic?
Into synthetic lethality, specifically in BRCA mutant cancer.
Right. I think immunotherapy, if you get it right, is amazing. And what's been demonstrated by, bear in mind the way science and the media go is if you have a fantastic result, it gets propelled into the BBC or online, and it gets published. It's often the small prints that are important. So, without being a sort of naysayer, immunotherapy through checkpoint inhibitors, it's miraculous because taking patients who had a certain outcome of death, you can make some of them have long-term survival. But the fact is that's probably still only 10-15%. So there are probably quite a lot of improvements, as you can imagine, for the other 85% who don't have that benefit. But, it's often a treatment you have in medicine. When you say to someone, look, are you going to have this operation? It's, you'll die without it. If you have the operation, you've got a 10%, 20% chance of surviving. Bearing in mind the frailty in the background of the person, you normally would take that odds. What we'd like to say is take this treatment and you've got 80 or 90% chance of success. But what the immunotherapy has done is shown when you get it right, you can take diseases which simply were incurable, and you can have almost a miraculous effect on the tumors go down, immune system attacks them, get quite a lot of toxicity and side effects with it. And actually, that toxicity and side effects is the other side of the fence. If you don't get it, it's unlikely to work, I think. It's more likely to work when your immune system kind of kicks off. There's some really clever, novel, bespoke treatments, where you take the particular tumor, you work out exactly what the mutations are, you work out if those mutations can be seen by the immune system, they're called neoantigens, and you generate a vaccine or you expand T cells that recognize those utterly individual mutations. And if you can do that, you can take a population of a patient's cells, recognize just that very individual mutation, you can expand them, and you can melt away the tumours. The fact is, for the one report that's written up in Science, there's 99 patients where that didn't work. And that's the trouble. So it's illustrative of a fantastic effect if you get it right. The immune system is so powerful, it's so specific, you can mop out the tumours, but for many people, it might not work because we don't get the other things right, immunosuppression and stuff. And also, it's astonishingly expensive. And I probably don't have the kind of the political imagination to envisage a world where we spend £10 million per patient. I work, half my job in the NHS, which is money restricted. And so I find it difficult to imagine how we can generate a treatment which is utterly bespoke for just this person. I can't see outside of sort of Russian oligarchs and American, billionaires who can afford that treatment. So I don't see how there's 1 billion people on the planet who live, subsistence living. I simply don't understand how 7 billion people in the world, how we could afford that very, very high-tech bespoke medicine. But what it does do is it illustrates that if we get the immune system right, it can work. That's why, I personally work on vaccines. We try and make vaccines which are generic, which can be used against for large populations. So that we can treat people in Delhi or Cape Town or Cardiff. I think immunotherapy is here to stay, and I think it will get better and better as it becomes more nuanced. But what I really want it to be is a treatment that's available for everyone, not a treatment that's available for the super rich.
Hopefully that cost will come down. If we think about just over 2 decades ago, the human genome, the time, the money, and now to do that, to sequence that over 20 years ago, but now we're able to do that. It's $1,000 genome. It's less than that, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, that's right. It's the logistics. I say it's probably my lack of political imagination, as much as anything, that, I'm just trying to visit. A patient comes in, has a tumor. How do you get that tumor biopsied, sequenced, and then generate a vaccine? And even when there's a pandemic in the world to a virus where the whole world's going to have the same vaccine, it takes 3 months to make a vaccine, or 4 months. I mean, Ebola virus, probably the quickest, I think, in recent times. That's about 3 months. So even when you've got a vaccine which everyone's going to have, imagine making a vaccine just for Mr. Williams of this address, and then you're going to make another one for Mr. Davis, another one for Mrs. Smith. Bespoke vaccine generation. Maybe if you're doing it millions and millions of times over, it does become quicker and quicker. I mean, you need someone like Ford with a production line, that kind of mentality, who has the imagination and the engineering skills and the logistic bioinformatics skills to put it together. I'm not equipped with those skill sets, but maybe the guy who makes Teslas, someone like that, who has the imagination to see the world as a small place, is what we need. But I just worry that it will be expensive. We already have a discrepancy in healthcare delivery. We know that people from lower social demographies don't get the same treatments for their viral hepatitis. They don't get the same access to cancer treatments. So I just think I'd be wary of making something which is going to benefit a very small percent of the planet, I think, and try and get in place the building blocks for good care for everyone.
So here's a question we've had earlier, and relating from what you've been talking about and horizon scanning, what are the next big successes for cancer research? And plugging it closer to home, how is Cardiff University a part of this? Where do you see Cardiff's role?
Well, I'd like to think we may be able to one day contribute something in generating vaccines which are more immunogenic and have an anti-cancer role. But I think also, particularly infection immunity, where I'm based in School of Medicine, I think there's some really, tantalizingly exciting options on the horizon. Professor Andy Sewell has found these, calls them agnostic T cells, which can recognize all manner of tumours. And this is a bit like I say, generating a treatment that doesn't just treat one person or one tumour, but can generate a whole range of them. And so he's actually attracted quite a lot of interest from industry on this. They obviously think it's a very exciting field. We have people who are interested in other sort of what are called innate type of mechanisms for controlling tumours, and have an interest in that in Cardiff. I think our strengths is definitely based, I'm probably a bit biased and I'll be shouted down with people at areas, but I think on T-cell biology, making our T-cells, our adaptive immune system, recognise tumours better. I think that's a real strength. And indeed, we've been putting together, Owen Gallimore has been putting together strategies in Cardiff, looking at our strengths, how we can translate T-cell therapies, and I think we could become a real powerhouse for this, and a UK centre for really innovative, exciting T-cell therapies targeting tumours. Obviously, this takes a buy-in from the government and the university, big health boards, but I do think we have an opportunity to do this kind of work in Cardiff.
Okay. We've time for one last question, and this is one asking how, not so much how have we handled the pandemic or that's affected us, but how are we looking forward through the pandemic to recover from the pandemic in terms of cancer research activity?
Well, I suppose when it's over, I'll buy a razor and have a proper shave again. I think, yeah, it's a really good question. How's the pandemics have impacted on us? There's no doubt about it. It's been difficult for everyone, both in work and outside of work. And it's always, so let's focus on some positives first of all. And I think there are some positives, both, in societal level and sort of, the way we work. I think doing meetings like this is fantastic. I think connecting to people all around the world. We're now having lectures from people in America and Australia. We're getting very connected, and sharing knowledge and ideas is really important. We are, in a funny sort of way, we kind of interact with our lab even more because we Zoom twice a week and stuff. So connectivity like that has been good. And the university has been very supportive, I think, of doing what's deemed essential work. They had to be, they had to put in place of correct health and safety, guidelines and stuff. And we are maybe a little bit risk averse, but that's the nature of big public sector institutions. It's different to the private sector, and that's how it is. But we have been able to get into the lab. We have continued to generate data. In fact, I think another positive for me in our lab has been we've been able to actually scrutinise our data very rigorously. We've actually published quite well in the last 18 months because stuff that's been sitting around, and that's enabled us to sort of, we've been actually quite busy writing grants for the next tranche of research. Not often you get that time to do it because you're normally sort of chasing your tail. So we have actually been able to keep going in our own way. We haven't been able to get patient samples. Obviously, we rely quite a lot on clinical samples and patients and human samples where we try to grow them up to look at how we could make them more immunogenic, etc. I think we'll come through the pandemic. I'd like to think we'll learn some lessons personally. I'm really keen that we vaccinate everyone and we go back to work. I'm also keen that the university does so, which is very innovative in the UK, along with Cambridge and Nottingham. We set up an ability to measure people's that are affected by PCR tests, so a PCR pipeline. And I'd like to think we could use that even more effectively there will be other pandemics, we know there will, but I'd like to think next time we could really use that to kind of screen people, almost every day or twice a week. So if you're not infected, you can go to work and work more effectively, very much like they did in some, the cricket in London stuff. So I think we should try and learn lessons. And I know the grass is always greener, but what I think we've done, compared to quite a lot of other Russell Group universities, I think we've been quite effective in Cardiff in keeping things ticking along, actually. You know, it's not been easy anywhere. I talk to colleagues in Glasgow or Nottingham or, you know, Manchester, Birmingham, you know. Sorry, we hear a dog howling in the background. I think Cardiff, you know, it's a hell of a job running a huge university, and bearing in mind you've got the sort of risk management, you've got, you know, no one wants to get infected or take risks, but we want to keep, you know, the business going of research, the business of teaching, business of running courses. You know, hopefully we can do it, you know, we can prove each time in the next time, but I think from a personal point of view, we've been lucky to have people in charge who've facilitated our research, actually.
Right. Andy, thank you so much. I would like to keep asking you questions, but it's time to wrap up. If we haven't managed to answer all your questions that have come through, and well, we haven't managed to answer them all this evening, we've had a good few come through. Thank you so much for sending them. We will follow up with you and get back to you with answers in the next few days. Andy, thank you so much for your
Pleasure.
time.
Yeah, pleasure.
And expertise.
By all means, my email address is pretty widely available. If anyone had a burning question, you know, they're more than welcome always to ping an email. You might get a reply at a funny time of the night, but they're more than welcome.
Thank you, that's really kind of you. Thanks, Andy. I also, before signing off, want to just give a very special thanks to our audience tonight who are watching as part of the Because of You Festival. As attendees, you're a mix of extraordinary friends, alumni who support Cardiff University through gifts of your time and money, and we're extremely grateful for your support. If anyone else is watching would like to get involved with Cardiff University, either through volunteering your time to help our students, donating to our good causes, perhaps leaving a gift in your will, or helping us to fundraise for our research, we'll add a link to the comments box below for you to follow. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Diolch yn fawr iawn. Good evening to all of you. Bye.